Standing up in McKinney. This is According to Callus, coming to you on the 20th of January, the year of our Lord 2025. It is episode 712. And I am aware, as so are you, that it is Inauguration Day. We just had the funeral for Jimmy Carter, and we're supposed to be celebrating Martin Luther King. As for me, I'm not directly involved in anything for either of those three issues. I got more important tasks at hand for today. However, we take a little time out. We got to give you a little show. So before we get on with the program, let me take a brief break. Let me remind you, as always, the thing I need most, the only thing I ask for, is for you to like, share, subscribe, follow the program. Join me on the social media of your choice. I have a page and a group over on Facebook. I am a pro at Gab, and I drop in at MeWe, and I'm on Twitter, though I just hadn't figured out what I want to do there yet. So there is a placeholder at Twitter. That being said, those likes, those shares, those follows, those subscriptions, if you're feeling particularly froggy, you could even rate and or review this here podcast. There are 12 as of today numbered episodes, and about another 30 or 40 affiliated non-numbered episodes. Podbean tells me I have over 750. I haven't been able to count what those extra episodes are. But be that as it may, I have plenty of content for you to peruse. Here we go, on with the program. Okay, so it's a new day, right? A new day today. We got a new president. The new legislative session is kicked off down in Austin. The Congress has been working on new bills with the new congressmen and new senators in place. So we should expect to see new things. Not necessarily good things, but new things. I don't want to celebrate too hard. I don't want to prematurely celebrate. You Texas fans out there know what I'm talking about. We want to make sure we get the wins. Okay, so we have many of the same problems now that we had 8 years ago. Most of the solutions that Donald Trump was able to get done were done in the form of executive orders, which were promptly overturned and, quite frankly, made dramatically worse under Biden. Now, while it is true the president's going to come in and presumably undo all of Biden's orders and reinstate his own with some hopefully new improvement and tweaks, there's a whole lot of damage that's been done in the previous 4 years, at least from my perspective. And look, as I always say, the show is predicated on my opinion of things or my understanding of things. It doesn't mean I'm not wrong. It doesn't mean I don't occasionally miss something. It just means that I'm here to provide you a point of view, an understanding, if you will, for you to then go take the time, if you're so inclined, to investigate, do your own research, and determine, yeah, he got it right, or no, he got it wrong, or yeah, it's pretty close. But that's your call. That's your responsibility. I'm here to inform and entertain. I'm here to educate and hopefully activate my listeners. So when I say we have the same problems, we still have a border that's out of control. We still have, quite frankly, a lot of people that are in power that are detrimental to our country and detrimental to the states that they run. And the question is, how do we deal with that? How do we overcome that? Well, there's a number of things that we can do. However, there are limits to the executive power. There are only certain things that the president can do legitimately. Now, I know President Biden tried to tell us that the Equal Rights Amendment was now recognized as being passed. It doesn't work that way. I know President Biden, who was determined not to be fit for trial, has issued tons of pardons, many of them for crimes not specified or charged. So I'm not quite sure how that works. Nobody doubts that you have the ability to give clemency or a pardon, but it would seem to me you need to at least be charged with something before you can be pardoned for it. I mean, that's like we're going to say anything you just did for the last 10 years doesn't matter. I've said you're free to go. Resident Joe did that with his son, and again, to a point, I understand it, right? He wouldn't want anybody to be looking into that family of his. I mean, whatever faults you might have in the Trump family, come on. You expect us to believe that Resident Joe and his clan were innocent? That they were good people? Oh, come on. But again, what can really be done? Well, here's the interesting thing. Resident Joe's pardons, even if they are legitimate, and I'm not convinced that they are, the clemencies, I'm not convinced that those are accurate either or appropriate. But even if they are, that's only at the federal level. That doesn't mean that any one state couldn't go after these same folks for the same things. Now, granted, if the feds are going to fight you tooth and nail, that might be a challenge. But if the feds just sit on the sidelines because they're ordered to do so, it could get interesting. Now, I'm not one to suggest that we're ever going to see legitimate justice, that anybody's ever going to hold anybody in D.C. accountable for what they've done, especially when the same people at the three-letter agencies over the last 4 years have spent more time tracking down people that took an unauthorized tour of the Capitol building, which supposedly is open to we the people and is owned by us. They've spent more time and effort tracking those folks down than dealing with the people coming across the border, that they dealt with the crime lawyers, that they've dealt with the corrupt people in D.C., or for that matter, Austin, but that's a different story. There are limitations to what the president can legitimately do. Now, it would be my sincere hope that by the end of the day today, Ross Ulbricht will receive his freedom. And to be honest, there's a number of other guys that I expect to get that same treatment. I'm not going to go down that list of names, but I'll just be very blanketish here. Anybody and everybody that was arrested and or charged for anything related to January 6th, based upon what we've seen in the lead up to this day, they ought to be pardoned fully, have the rest of their sentences, whatever, commuted, and quite frankly, a lot of them need to be compensated for the damage that was done to them. And I think in an ideal world, that would come out of the funds that are sent to the three-letter agencies that arrested them in the first place. I won't hold my breath. But the second thing is, with the executive orders are, at least in theory, supposed to be only binding to the executive branch, i.e., the law enforcement agencies and regulatory agencies that work for the executive department, and the leader of the executive branch, if you will, is the president. Boy, I'm looking forward to DOGE. I'm hopeful, cautiously optimistic, you might say, that they're going to make some radical changes. And when I say radical changes, I legitimately mean radical changes. And it pains me to say this, but I would like to see the ATF abolished and done away with in its entirety. And what little concerns that might have been legitimate at the time of the creation of the the BATFE could be transferred over to the respective states and or perhaps the FBI. Now, the FBI, on the other hand, it would be my dream, my wish list, would be gutted down to about 20% of its size. And I would suggest that there are no more headquarter agents. Everybody's going to have a field office in each of the 50 states, and they're going to coordinate with each other in a network and they're basically booted out of D.C. If you want to give them a headquarters somewhere, I don't know. How about Las Cruces, New Mexico? Maybe Boulder, Colorado. Somewhere where the FBI could actually be used for something useful, i.e. reining in the drug lords. Dealing with that. And while we're at it, perhaps, maybe this is a bit of a pipe dream here, but I would love to see the DEA folded up into nothing. Maybe it could just be a coordination tool. Maybe it could be used for, let's say, intelligence related to that issue. But at what time or place did we find that the federal government had the authority to be involved in drugs? What constitutional issue are they covered under to say that they can do that role? Now, look, I realize I'm hitting at some third rails here. And again, I'm going to just say from the onset, I'm almost certain none of this is going to happen. But just, I mean, if we're going to talk about a fantasy land, right? Donald Trump 2.0, he's learned from his mistakes, and he's got Vivek and Elon here that are going to go in and start gutting things that, quite frankly, don't perform a function that is constitutionally permissible or, quote unquote, useful to the nation as a whole. I mean, those are just some places we could start. But while we're at it, I'm just, and again, realizing that I did serve in the Navy and I love my Navy. I'm not quite sure why we have 11 carrier groups. I'm really not quite sure why we have the F-35 when we could have just, I don't know, upscaled the F-14, the F-15, perhaps have a newer version of the F-16 for a fraction of the cost. But again, I don't run the Pentagon. Perhaps Pete Hegseth will have some success there. But every enlisted person and every officer that is there ought to have a real job and ought to have an important function. And they ought to be physically capable of doing that job and mentally acute. Or is that the word I want to use? How about mentally capable of doing the job? And some dude wearing a dress just does not give me any confidence. For those of you old enough, I just think of Klinger every time I see that. Now, granted, Colonel Potter knew that it was a scam, and he didn't let him have it, but is that really what we're dealing with in today's day and age? While we're at it, the one thing the president has, legit power, not just executive orders, but is foreign policy. Now, the Donald has been the peace president. He advocates that we need to end the current wars. He pushes to get past these things, and I'm enthusiastically supportive of that. Now, I'm not sure how that fits in with taking back Panama or buying Greenland, since apparently Denmark doesn't want to give it up, but I would love nothing more than for the end to the latest Israeli war, to the end of the Ukraine-Russian war, right? These are things that Donald Trump has said he wants to put an end to ASAP. And I think that's very possible, and I'm appreciative of that. And in light of that, perhaps we can rethink what we're doing with our military. The countless, endless wars that we've endured over, well, certainly the last half century here, and the amount of men, and to a degree women, that we've sent to go get maimed and destroyed mentally, bring back and give the bare minimum of any support to, I'm not sure we're doing our country any good. I'm not sure we're doing the world any good at this point. Perhaps we ought to rethink that. Now, again, wishful thinking, but Pete Hegseth appears to have different priorities with how the Pentagon and the Department of Defense ought to run. At least back in the old days, we were honest about what that department did. It was the War Department. It was the embodiment of, well, I'm not going to say it, but just FA, yeah. Yeah, if you know, you know. It is necessary, though, that we rethink everything. We have north of $30 trillion worth of debt now. We're never, ever going to pay that off if we don't find a way to quit spending money that we, quote unquote, don't have. We can print it out, but we don't have it. The reality is you can make money, but the more money you make, the less valuable it is. And again, we're not doing anybody any good. So perhaps we'll see an audit of the Fed. Perhaps we'll actually see, do we actually own the gold in Fort Knox anymore? Perhaps we can find all these things out. I mean, I, for one, would like to know who legitimately killed Kennedy. I would like to know what's going on with the drones or UFOs. I would like to know these things. But it remains to be seen. So it is a new day in D.C., and to a lesser extent, it is a new day in Austin. What does that mean for us? It means that we've already saw that those in power will sell out the people that got them there in order to maintain power. What do I mean? Some of the grassroots I will just say this, had unrealistic expectations of what was going to happen. We were hopeful, we were pushing, we're demanding. We wanted the best, but at the end of the day, the Uniparty protects itself first. We knew that was going to happen. We don't like it. We're irritated by it, but we're going to continue to fight on. But in the meantime, they won the battle. We have to continue to press. We have to continue to work with them to get the right things done. Now, we have, at least in theory, the lieutenant governor and the Senate willing to work with us and the grassroots level. And in theory, we have the governor that has a number of things that he would like to see happen, ostensibly cutting deals with the grassroots. But we have two issues that just don't seem to go away. One is the government education system. I think there are a number of different options on how we could fix that, and I've spent some time dealing with it in the past, and perhaps what I'll do is on the third episode of this week, I'll delve into just some thoughts off the top of my head, how we might improve the educational system, how you might alter it to, quite frankly, protect the people that are already in education, i.e. get their buy-in, and also benefit the families and the children that need it most. So we'll revisit that in the near future. That also requires, now that we're there, that we're going to have leadership take action, and they're going to stand up and they're going to do the right thing. Now, one of the things that we did see before is, love it or hate it, Donald Trump did respect federalism. He said there are things I would like for the states to do, there are things I want the states to do, but he didn't try and push them to do things. Now, he did encourage them. He did use the bully pulpit, but for the most part, he let states be states. And being that that is the case, and we're getting another shot at it here, I would love to see Greg Abbott find the strength that he obviously has, right? A guy that gets in a car accident, or I'm sorry, I might have that wrong. Let's just put it this way. A guy that gets in an accident, that loses the power to walk, that finds it in himself to fight back and go to law school and graduate and get elected, it's got to be like 10 different times now, to serve the people and stand in the gap. That's the kind of guy, I'm wondering where he's been at. When is he going to lead from the front? He has the biggest platform in our country, aside from the presidency. Lead from the front. Work, partner with D.C. Get that wall done. Figure out a way to deal with the people that came here that, quite frankly, we don't want. There are some people that came here, though illegally, that we might want. We need to know who's who. We need to sort that out. There's no reason the state of Texas can't and shouldn't be leading the way in that. And when I say don't want, I know that sounds harsh, but it's a reality. You can't dump in an extra million people somewhere that aren't a net value add and expect it to be a positive thing. I don't know what all the answers are, but I do know what we're doing is not working. I do know that to continue to do the wrong thing is not going to ever solve a problem. So I'm confident. I'm hopeful. I'm cautiously optimistic. However, whatever works in your soul, that, hey, Greg Abbott's going to start leading. And if not, Dan Patrick's going to start pushing him to lead. That's my hope. That's my dream. That's my desire. Can we see some of these things get done? And when we're talking about reforming the government schools, one thing I'm fairly confident of, putting more government into government schools, not going to fix things. Putting more government into non-government schools, not going to fix things. Just saying. That means that we have to come up with something innovative, something new, something, I don't know, free market based perhaps. But we're going to have to deal with the issue that what we have been doing has not been working. Let's try something new. We can make a difference if only we will put in the effort, if only we will try. I'm hopeful. So as this new day is here, I shouldn't let it pass that North Carolina had large swaths of its state brutally damaged by a hurricane. And I guess to a lesser extent, South Carolina, perhaps even Georgia. I don't know where they're at, but I do know that we haven't dealt with it well. Now, it's real easy to blame Joe Biden. I don't know that it's all his fault, but it was his administration. They didn't get it done. And it was the leaders of those states, because clearly, if it's, what are we at, 6 months out or 5 months out? Who knows at this point? I don't, not off the top of my head. I sure don't. I'm not going to lie. But even if it's 90 days out, you ought to have a plan that's been implemented that these people are being taken care of. They are our people. We should be prioritizing them before anything going on in Ukraine or Israel. Yet, that's not what we've been doing. And now that we look upon California, and look, there's a certain part of me that says, well, California does keep electing these progressive leftist socialists, and they keep doing progressive leftist socialist things, and their very policies are some of the reasons why the fires have gotten out of hand like they have. But is it really fair to blame all those people? Is it really fair to lump them all in together? I mean, does that make it any different than what the leftist progressive socialists do when they lump in everybody from the South together, or they lump everybody from a red state together? I mean, is that really where we're at now? There are people, they're hurting. They clearly should be a higher priority than somewhere else in the world. Interestingly enough, I saw that at one point Dwayne Johnson and Oprah Winfrey were out soliciting funds for the people in Hawaii. Now, my question would be Oprah, you're worth over $1 billion, and Dwayne, you're worth probably a couple $100 million at this point. How much skin in the game do you have? How much did you do to help these people? Oh, I know. You gave your time. You gave your time to raise money for them. And that's all well and good. I appreciate that. But your time doesn't equate to sandwiches made. Your time doesn't equate to resources provided. Unless the other people donated because you were there telling them they ought to. But part of leading is to lead by example. I mean, again, when you look at Donald Trump, admittedly, at least 47% of our country that bothered to vote doesn't like the guy, at least compared to Kamala. He didn't take a paycheck. He donates a ton of money and time to all sorts of different things, whether you like them or not, because that's what people that are rich like that do. They lead by example. They do those things. Now, unfortunately, that also means we get guys like Bill Gates, George Soros, to a degree, Warren Buffett, that have all this money, and they throw their money around, and those groups that receive the money oftentimes are not working towards things that we would like to see done, or they're doing things that, quite frankly, we don't like at all. But at least they can say they're doing something. Unfortunately, it usually means it's negative towards us. But again, that's just my opinion. That's just my observation. Your mileage may vary. At the end of the day, we had a dawn. What are we going to do with it? My advice, trust but verify. My advice, prayerfully support those that are in authority and those that are in power. And to another extent, support them, encourage them, let them know. Earlier today, I got we'll call it an unsolicited text from an elected official. It says, do you support Congressman so-and-so in doing X, Y, Z, or what should we do? And I said, well, the number one priority, free Ross and free the J6 people. Then I had to respond, yeah, I know that's not your job. That's the president's. But it would be nice if the congressman would come out and say that as well. And while we're at it, I mean, there's Edward Snowden, there's Julian Assange, right? We've got several other, for lack of a better word, political prisoners out there that did nothing more than try and protect the country by telling us what our country was up to that was wrong, evil, unconstitutional, warmongering, however you want to phrase it. Yeah, okay, maybe they were revealing secrets. Maybe somebody had a consequence somewhere in a very negative way because of that. But is it their fault that they outed something that shouldn't have been happening in the first place? Or is it the fault of the people that authorized and encouraged those terrible things that we were doing in the first place? Perhaps they ought to be held accountable far more than the one that blew the whistle on them. Just a thought. So again, it is a new day. Cautiously optimistic, hopeful, encouraging you to be courageous going forward. How can we make sure that our leaders know this is what we want? That requires a little bit of activism and a little bit of your time and your efforts. With that, this has been According to Callus. It is Inauguration Day 2025. And our president, once again, is Donald John Trump. We'll see what that means starting tomorrow. And I will see you on the other side.
For all your Texas fashion tees, it's TexianPride.com. Whether you're out honky-tonkin' in Austin, bucking Broncos in Fort Worth, or strolling the San Antonio Riverwalk, Texian Pride is here for you. Support a Texan-owned business and show off your love for Texas with style. Visit TexianPride.com for your next fashionable Texas tee.